going on, guys? Doing something a little different today. With the New York International Auto Show, seeing what the future holds for motorsport and car enthusiasm as we know it. And before we get started on our journey through the Javits Center here, we think there's no better place to start than at the Radwood booth. Center our perspective on the future, taking stock in what we love about the past. Welcome back to the Curb Cut. For those of you who may be unfamiliar, Radwood is essentially a brand that curates and organizes car meets, focusing primarily on period-correct builds from the 80s and 90s. Some might say these were the salad days of tuning. See, throughout the 80s and 90s, there seemed to be an unstoppable force in the automotive industry that was continually pushing the envelope in terms of design and engineering for sports cars and supercars alike. This was the poster car period in automotive history. It seemed as though every manufacturer was onto something different, and the 4th of the annual auto show provided a little something for everyone. The schools of thought were varied and endless. You were free to choose your own adventure from an assortment of vehicles that were practically begging to be toyed with. Now, not so much. Somewhere in the late 2000s, the automotive industry seemed to take the reins away from the enthusiasts and began producing cars that were prepackaged for the unimaginative consumer. In the 80s and 90s, you could point to any factory production sports car, muscle car, or even a modest sport compact and see where the torch was being handed from the manufacturer to the enthusiast. Once you left the showroom, it was up to you to squeeze the juice from your new car. And so many cars of the era were ripe for the picking. It fostered the perfect formula for car ownership and enthusiasm. The question came in two parts. What kind of car did you own, and what were you going to do to it? This formula created the biggest boom in the aftermarket industry and had people more invested in expressing themselves behind the wheel than ever before. But again, by the late 2000s, automotive manufacturers started to take notice of this, and instead of selling us a blank slate to run wild with, the formula had changed. Manufacturers started to design and sell us cars that they thought we wanted, over-designed and over-engineered to the point where inspiration had suddenly left the room. It became a numbers game, really, focused on stat sheets and sticker prices. For example, early runs of the Impreza WRX might have been described as aesthetically under-designed, but for enthusiasts, this left ample room for creative embellishments with aftermarket mods. This created a diversity of vision among enthusiasts while celebrating a common bond among the drivers that altogether revere the manufacturer for providing them with a space to express themselves. Now look at the WRX. Honestly, look at this fucking thing. Over-embellished body lines, chunky interior flourishes, computer screens, and techified ergonomics. It's a video game car, essentially. The special meter is definitely glowing in some areas, and Subaru is more than capable to do something right. But why does this car not excite me with its potentials the same way that the Bug Eye once did? But Subaru isn't the only guilty party to this shift in priorities. If you remember our video on the new 400Z, we weren't particularly inspired by this one either. Now that being said, it was cool to see it in person, only because it truly felt like I was looking at every generation of Z car at once in a single chassis. As you walk around the car, it becomes very apparent that Nissan was pulling a little from column A here, a little from column B there, and focused on building a new car that's supposed to remind us of when things were new and exciting. But why doesn't this feel new and exciting? See, while the 400Z claims to be speeding through Thrill Street, wherever the hell that is, the car on display looks more like it's parked on a digital rendering page. It almost feels like the amorphous data rendering of what some AI mined from the Hive based on Google results for Z-Car. Frankly, it almost feels alien. Nothing about it shares the same organic potential that previous models used to tout within the pedigree. Instead of celebrating a continuation of tradition, the 400Z feels more like a digitized conclusion of the Z-Car. Where are we supposed to go from here? And why are so many manufacturers focused on selling us a pre-game car? After all, so many of us enthusiasts are looking to play without cheat codes. And so look, maybe that's why I'm happy to see Subaru making more BRZs, and I'm definitely interested to see what happens when Toyota's GR Corolla hits the market. Hell, reading the 6-speed manual only stat on its placard felt relieving after wandering through an arena full of tradition breakers. Maybe this was the biggest takeaway from the auto show this year. Cars are no longer what they promised to be. The manufacturers have clearly shifted their focus, and in turn, your average driver will stray further and further from the golden tradition of where we've been. In the modern tech world, manufacturers are treating their cars more like new devices, developing and marketing them with the same lame focus group cachets that they used to sell digital cameras and cell phones. This whole production felt more like a tech convention than it did a car show. Hell, some people are really leaning into this motif, and plenty of others are buying in. but honestly, it's simultaneously the most embarrassing and heartbreaking thing to witness. And with that, get a load of the Cobra C300, the future that none of us were asking for. This is what happens when a team of Hungarians sucks the soul out of one of the most iconic V8 sports cars of all time and sells it back to you as cutting edge. This thing is about as cutting edge as your uncle wearing Oakleys at the family barbecue, about as hip as your grandpa trying to remember his email password, as inspired as a battery strapped to a skateboard, which plenty of dorks seem to be doing now too. Yeah, anyway, it's that bad. But this is clearly where things are headed, and allow this prototype to serve as a warning. Do not let the automotive industry do this to us. Take stock in what matters to you, and truly consider where your inspirations flourish most. Remember, we're talking about automobiles here, guys. Things we used to refer to as cars. You know, hot rods, tuners, sports cars, trucks. When we allow the spirit of these things to be co-opted by mobility device companies, the whole ship is going to sink into the ocean like a ton of dead batteries. And I hate to tell you, as your ship sinks, the band isn't going to bow a beautiful rendition of your favorite song. All you're going to hear is an MP3 of what a carbureted V8 sounded like as the lights go out around you. It's funny, it doesn't smell like anything. So if the New York International Auto Show affirmed anything to me, let it be this. Buy old cars and save them. The cars we know and love today are only going to stick around if we do this ourselves.